Hi, I guess we will start. Looks like most people are here. So we're going to start. Welcome again to Demonstrating Success's version of the state assessment system modular assessments. And those are what we used to call the interims, and now they're the modulars or the benchmarks. So we'll talk about that. Do I have any? Mike Schwartz and Karen Matzo are both here with me today. And
Hello.
Hi, Mike. There's Mike. Hi, Karen.
Hi. Hi.
And Mike is going to monitor questions. So if you have questions, he can help you with that. Actually, what he'll do is he'll see the question and he'll interrupt me, and then we'll answer it, hopefully, if I can. So please ask questions whenever they come up. Anything else to start? Oh yes, I've got some other things. If you look down at the bottom of your control panel, there's a place for handouts, and there are 3 handouts. One is the certification document for today for the hour for your certification. One is the PowerPoint, so you can download that. And the last one is just something I thought you might want from the PowerPoint. It's all the different topics for the benchmarks and modulars. So anything else to start, Mike, that you can think of?
Nope, I think you said it well. I will be watching for questions, so please feel free to ask questions, and I will forward them to.
Great, thank you. One thing I would like to do just to start is to have you think for a minute about some questions you might have. You've all probably either used the system, wanted to use the system, tried to use the system and it didn't work. So if there's something you have a particular question about, this will be a great time to put it out there, and I'll just make sure that I address it throughout the webinar. Otherwise, just type in the questions as they come. That'd be great.
And there's a question about when it'll be available.
The assessments they opened up in October, so they are available now. So they've been available for about a month. Okay. For this session, we're going to talk about, I want to tell you what they are, how you access these assessments, why would you use the assessments, we'll talk about that. How do you administer them? How do we look at the results, and what do the results mean, and what do they look like, and what can we do about them after that? So these are the 4 session goals. And this is sort of the agenda we're going to follow through like this. So we're going to start with what are they and why should I use them? The modular assessments, and like I said a minute ago, they're called the modulars, the interims, and the benchmarks. They're called all these different things. I may switch back and forth between what I call them, but there is no distinction between the modular and the benchmark. That's the same, but the interims are something different. So I'm going to tell you the difference in a minute, but I probably will switch back and forth. Not on purpose. So the modular assessments they're optional assessments. You can give them or not give them. They're great to give though. The questions in these assessments are all Common Core questions. They're questions that are written by the SAS people. Actually, I don't know how to say that. The people who write the questions for the SAS assessment. You can give them any time of year after they're open, and they are open now. Last year they opened, I think it was in November, so this year they opened a little bit earlier. You can administer all of these for the grade that the student's in, or you can administer them for a grade that a student is not in. So if you have a student who's functioning at a really high grade, you've got a 5th grade student who's functioning at 8th grade level, you could give them the 8th grade test. And same the other way. If you want to give all of your 4th graders the 3rd grade math test at the beginning of the year, that's a great way to start. So students can take any grade level. And the assessments are administered in clusters or modulars. That's what they're called. Or they're interims, which are all of the standards. So the interims are more like the whole SAS test, where we'll cover everything or try and cover everything. Whereas the modulars will just cover one piece, like editing or fractions. So piece by piece, so you can choose which one you want. They are available through the exact same website, the airask.org, or the nh.portal, airask.org, where we administer the summative assessments in the spring. They'll help you. These are all the benefits. There are millions of them, I think. I think they're the best things. They'll help you understand each child's progress and gaps. At the beginning of the year, you can determine if your students learned what they were supposed to learn last year and what kind of gaps you might need to fill in. You can measure student achievement if you need to have three points of data for a student. This can be one of them. It can help you determine groupings for interventions, RTI. You can also start evaluating program impact. If your intervention is using some program and all your kids are still not getting anywhere, that might evaluate the impact of the program. Might be something else, but you can use that data for that. You could also determine if you need more resources. Do we need more teachers? Do we need more books? Do we need other things based on the results of this test, although it might be a hard argument to make sometimes. You can focus on groups of standards and not the entire curriculum, which is great. And in some ways it can be like a end of unit type test where you teach editing and then you give an assessment on it and see how they did. The results are immediate. So right when the student logs off and you log off, the results are ready. And that is a wonderful thing. So that night you can go home and see how the kids did. You can see results at the question level. So you can see the questions and you can see how students answered them. Your own students answered the questions, which is really helpful. You can determine mistakes they've made, errors they have, misunderstandings they have. Yeah. You have a question? Yeah.
Yep. The question about whether the question on the test are automatically answered by the computer, or whether the teacher has to answer.
They're automatically answered. So the computer scores the test, which is different. When these were SBAC, there were some that had to be answered by the teacher, and those are not. We don't have those anymore. So they're automatically answered by the software. These are the things I like the best about them. I'm not going to give them an order probably, but for third graders who have never taken the test before, this is a great way to get them used to taking the test. Just you give it to them a few times a year, 3-4 times during the year, and the modulars take only one period. They're only 9 or 10 questions, and they just get used to taking the test. They're not afraid. They understand how to maneuver around. So that's a really nice piece of giving these assessments. Another thing, and my favorite thing, is that we, the teachers, get to understand what the standards are with more depth. I may think I know what I'm supposed to be teaching when it says adding fractions, but when I look at the questions, then I can really understand what the standards, not necessarily how they want me to teach it, but what about adding they want. Or rounding, that's another one. The way a lot of, we teach rounding, you move over to the number to the left and then you go up or down based on the number. And when you look at the questions for rounding, you'll see that that kind of answer that kind of lesson isn't going to help kids. So it really helps us understand what the standards are. And this is one of the huge benefits right here. Not on this page because I haven't gotten there yet, but in 2014-15, when the SBACs first came out, there was a teacher that I was working with who her students at the end of the year, 50%, you can see right here, 50% of her students were scored a level 3 or 4. In 2015-16, 50% of her students scored a 3 or 4, level 3 or 4. This year, 2016-17, so this was really 2 years ago, she started using the modulars, and she herself learned what she was supposed to be teaching, and 88% of her students in 1 year, obviously it's a different cohort, but 88% of her students scored a level 3 or 4. Then last year, it was the same thing. The reports are different now, the results come out differently. We don't have targets anymore in claims. So this is what it looks like this year. But 88%, again, this year or last year, of her students scored a level 3 or 4. So they made a huge difference for this teacher, and that's really what we're doing, is trying to make a difference in their learning. So here's the difference between the interims and the modulars, and I already mentioned it. The interims are the whole assessment. It's similar in content to the summative. It covers all of the standards, most of the standards. You can get them in math, ELA, and science. And then the modulars, they focus on the smaller set of related concepts. So they provide, well, detailed information. They do detailed information for instruction. So you can look at just fractions. You can't look at the detail of comparing fractions if you give this, well, you can actually. So if the fractions modular assessment has 10 questions and 3 of them are about comparing, you can actually pull those out and look at just those. So you really can get down to detail. The science, well, I'll tell you that part in a minute. These are the different choices. How are we doing on questions, Mike? Anybody going for more questions?
I have a question that I was asked yesterday about the quality, how the quality of the questions differ between SBAC and the New Hampshire SAS modules.
From what I can tell, they're very similar. So they're supposed to be they're supposed to be the same. They seem very similar to me. Some of the questions on the modulars are really hard, and some are a little easier. And SBAC, okay, you know, is similar.
So you feel like they reach a depth of knowledge similar to the ones that were in the SBAC from last year?
I do. I think with math, and can you answer that for ELA? Do you know?
I can't answer it.
Okay. I mean, there's the plan for them was that they would be similar. Okay. They're all supposed to be evaluating the Common Core. The Common Core has a lot of depth, so therefore, you know, they're supposed to be the same. So.
Okay, I'll pass that on.
Yep. Okay, great. So the different modular choices are for math. We have it for grades 3 through 8. ELA, and this is an interim too. ELA 3 through 8, and science is 5, 8, and 11. Just like the grades that are tested. The different subjects that are covered. ELA for grades 3 through 8 are all the same. They cover editing, informational text, listening, and reading literature. For writing, 3 through 5 has informative and opinion. So, and I believe, well, on the interims you could do either one or both. And writing for 6 through 8 is informative and argumentative. Karen, is that?
And there's a question. Can you? The question is, can you do just one of those ELA areas at a time, and also can you choose like any 2 of them at a time, or does the student have to do one and then come back and do the second?
Well, the student can. They have to, if you choose one for them to do, they would have to finish it. Then they have to log off and they can log back on again. But that can all happen at the same setting. But yeah, they can't just pretend, you know, like stop one and then start the next. They actually have to log off and log back on again. But it only takes them a second to log on. Okay. Let's see. So the next one is math. Ooh, that got big, didn't it? So math, grades 3 through 5 is, we got some heating, blowing. And everybody okay with, can you still hear me?
Yep, yeah. You're fine.
All right, good. Fine. So math grades 3 through 5, you can take a modular on measurement, data, and geometry. Numbers and operation base 10, numbers and operations fractions, or operations and algebraic thinking. So if you know the math standards, those are really the domains, except for there's one domain that's measurement and data, and there's one domain that's geometry, but they're kind of mushed together here. So if you can't just take a modular on geometry. But you can, after you get the results, just pull out those questions and those answers. 6, 7, and 8 are all a little different based on the standards that they have. 6, I don't need to read these. I'm sorry, I won't keep reading them. But these are based on the domains for the different grades. So you can take each one of these types.
And there's a question about how long it takes. Well, it takes for one module, like for this. I believe the question is for the student.
Okay. For the math modulars, there are about, and for the ELA, there are about 8, 9, 10 questions, sometimes 11. For the interims, they're a little longer. I think they have 30, but I'm not sure of that. So those will take a lot longer. But the 8 or 9 questions, if the students actually do the work to get through them, it will take an hour, a class period, unless they just know them and it'll be done in 30 minutes, or they just hit enter and then also be done in 10 minutes then. But they can be done in one class period. The science ones are overwhelming to me, but these are all the different options for science. For 5th grade, you've got all these topics that come up. 8th grade, you've got history of Earth, space science, weather and climate, all of these parts. And if you want to know what all of these parts are, and I mean, if you teach science, chances are, hopefully you know what these are. They're all based on the next gen standards. You can go in and look and find out what types. You can go to the next gen website and read the standards, but you can also just go and look at the questions on these modulars and get some idea of what the standards are saying. You wouldn't know everything about the standards, but you certainly would have a good idea of what they're talking about. To access the assessments, you just go to that newhampshire.portal.airask.org that we've been using for a couple of years for the summatives. It's the same website. It looks the same. You actually use it almost identically. Whoops, something happened there. This is when you first go to this website, this is the home page. And you click on test administration right here. And this is the second page. I used to call it the 9-box page, but there are now more than 9 boxes, so I don't know what to call it other than the second page. These are all the different buttons. Oh, now there are 9 buttons again. That's right. So I'm going to call it the 9-box page. And these are the different parts of it. And I'm quickly going to go over what each of these buttons is for, because they're not all important. We don't need them all for the interims, but I'm just going to go over them. So the test administration is the button that you use when you want to administer the assessment. So when the students are going to take the test, it's the same button that you use when you're going to administer the summative at the end of the year. My goodness, I don't know why they're disappearing. The online reporting system is where we get the reports for the summatives, not the interims. The practice and training site is where you can practice and do some training. Parents can actually log on to this site and look at the questions and do some practice. Tide is where all the student information is and all the teacher information and the school administrator information, who the users are, what their roles are. Students are in there by grade. You can look at their accommodations. You can change their accommodations. That's what Tide is. Print test tickets. Test administration certification. This, if you've never given the test before, for the summative, you're required to take this test, or it won't actually let you do it. So it takes about 30 minutes, and you have to go through the process once. But you will need to do that for the interims if you've never taken it. The assessment viewing application is one we're going to go into in a minute. This is where you can view the questions, and it's an important little piece. Airways is where you look at the interim or benchmark modular results, where you can see all your students' results. This is resources. You can get manuals on how to use the different parts of the system, manual on how to set up accommodations, things like that. And the inbox is when you download a report, it will go to your inbox. So that's what all these 9 pieces are. I think if you've used the test before, you've used most of these pieces. So that is what they are and why should I use them. Everybody else set? Or should I keep going? It looks like maybe I should just keep going.
You keep going.
All right, I will. So what are the questions like? That's a huge, you don't want to give the test without at least looking at the questions. So what do they look like? So the final piece before you actually administer the test, or maybe the very first thing you want to do, is look at these questions and see what they're like. This is the viewing assessment application. So you go in there. You have to log on. So you have to get your ID. You probably forgot your password. Every year you have to get a new password anyway. So if you haven't logged on to the system this year, you have to get a new password. And they give it, you get it right away. This year, sometimes they're sending you a code. So if you log on 5 times, the 6th time they might say, oh, here, we're going to check your email again, and we're going to give you this code, and you have to enter it. So that seems to have been added this year. But once I choose the assessment viewing application, I'm going to come in here. I very often get this error message, and I just click it and ignore it. Then I need to select the grade. What grade assessment do I want to look at? So I select, in this case, I'll select 6th grade. These are some of the choices. Here's ELA editing and ELA editing. So this is editing A and B and C. Editing has 3 versions of the assessment. They are theoretically, version A, version B, and version C are supposed to be the same. You could give version A, see where your students are. If they need some reteaching, you could reteach. You could use the questions from B for your reteaching, and then you could give them C as a post-test. The problem is they really aren't the same, so you just have to look at the test before you do that. They really, A might be way harder than B, and B might be way harder than C, so you have to check that out before you do it. You could just give A as a pretest, and then much later give A as a post-test, depending on what's in there. So you really have to look at the questions. But for now, I'm going to go in. I'm going to look at this. Yep.
There's a question of is A always the same questions? And I think what they're saying is, anyone who takes A throughout the state, anytime during the year, are they always getting the same set of 9 or 10 questions?
Yes. A for the modulars they're the same set of questions. Okay. So the questions that you can look at through this assessment viewing application are the questions they'll get, and that doesn't change. So I'm going to look at this one first. And then I get to go in here and I can select the form. So it's basically, do I want to look at the Form A or Form B? And you have to look at Form A because there really is no Form B. You have to pick the first one. I'm hoping that they're going to put another version of A out there. They just haven't done it yet. So right now you have to pick the first one. There's no other choice. And up comes the first question. I had to block it because we're not supposed to, you're not supposed to be passing out all these questions, but you can go in and look at it. The first question comes up. In order to move to the second question, you have to put in an answer. It doesn't have to be right. You just have to put something in there. And then click next. Then it goes to the next question. So that just continues on. That's the same for all of them. It will bring you right to the questions. If you want to just look at them and click next. And look at the next one and click next. Let's see. So this is an ELA. This is the informational text part, version A of it. Here's version B and here's version C. I'm going to look at A. And if you've never seen these before, they are different. So for the 3rd graders especially, you do want to show them how to use these tests. One thing you have to do is hear the sound when you're doing the ELA test. And teachers and kids, they'll all just say, oh, I heard the sound, and they'll click, I heard the sound. But you actually have to click on there and hear the sound. Once you hear the sound, you'll come to the first question. A passage is on this side, and the questions are over here. This is a little different. We used to scroll through the questions, and now we just go from one to the next to the next. So all of these questions are related to this passage. If I want to look at question number 2, I just click on 2 and it will bring me to the next question. Question number 3, I can look at the next question. Now, this is something that the students need to know before they take the test. If they would rather read this in a different fashion, it's very small. This is a small panel here. They can click here and widen it so that the passage takes up most of their screen, which is very handy. They can also zoom in and zoom out with these. If they don't have a chance to log on and play around with it before the summative test, they won't know these things. So as a teacher, you need to figure out how to use it yourself and then show them how to use it. Then you can close that. You can also make the questions bigger. By clicking this, the questions will be bigger. So that can go back and forth, but they do need to try it. So that was what other questions like. The only way you're going to know is to actually go into the assessment viewing application and look at them. Now we will move on to how do I administer them? Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm sorry. Question: if the questions in Modular A is the same each time, should I always use a different one, or is it okay to give the same test to the same student?
So whoever asked that, if you could get them to clarify while I talk about, are you talking about using them for, what are you using them for? That would be my first question. But if you're going to give them for a pretest, I know for the math pretest, you could give the students the math pretest, then don't review the questions with them, but teach them how to solve the problems. So like if you review the questions and the answers, then I would not give the test again as a test. But if you don't review the questions, then you could give the same test again. They won't. The only way they'll do better is if you taught them how to do better. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. If the person has questions, type them in.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it does, since they're not all the same. It would be great if A, B, and C were identical, or not identical questions, but identical difficulty. Because then you could give A, and then you could give B, and then you could give C, but they're really not. So just be careful about that. So now we go on to how do I administer these tests? It's exactly the same way as you administered the summatives. If you've done that before, it's the same. If you haven't, then you won't know. So how do I administer them? You first log on. Again, this is the home page. You go to Test Administration. And then you go to Test Administration. So you think that would have been nice if they had 2 different names on that button, but they're 2 different buttons with the same name. But it's Test Administration. And 99.9% of the time I get this this pop-up blocker. You have to go in and refresh, open this and always allow, and then click done and refresh. If you don't know how to get rid of the pop-up blockers, then you should probably have someone show you that, because it might be, I have a Mac, it might be different on your computer. Most people get that pop-up blocker, even if you change it to always allow. So once you come in here, these are your choices. If the summatives were also available right now, you would see the summative assessment. So you could actually give the kids the summative assessments by mistake. But don't worry about that, because if you do, you do, right? There's nothing else you can do about it. But chances are you're not going to, because the summatives aren't available until the end of the year. To use these, you want to make sure that you use the plus sign. So I'm going to say that a couple times. Use the plus sign. Otherwise, you're opening up billions of things. So I'm going to back up here. There's a plus sign here. I could check this, or I could put something in that box. If I use the plus sign, these will open, and the boxes will still be empty. So I'm going to use the plus sign again. And these all open. These are my choices for the interim math tests. There's one for grade 3, one for grade 4, and all the way through 8. What was I going to show here? Oh yeah, if I don't use the plus sign and I click in that box, this is what happens. I'm going to start all the assessments. And I don't want to do that because it can be confusing confusing for the students. They'll be able to see, oh, I can take grade 3, I can take grade 4, I can take grade 5, and they're not going to necessarily know which one to start. So use the plus sign. In this case, I only want to give the 5th grade interim. So I'm going to close this. Now for the modulars, use the plus sign. Have I said that enough already? Probably. But use the plus sign. So here again, now I've got I opened up the choices for modulars. I've got ELA and math. I'm going to give math, I'm going to use the plus sign. Which grade? And I have more plus signs here. Yeah, I hear you getting on, Mike. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ann, thanks. Somebody's asking if is it okay to give a higher grade then to somebody who is doing well on the current grade? Absolutely.
If you have a student that can take a higher grade, absolutely do it. And a lot of times in 8th, for 7th grade, you've got a 7th grade class taking algebra, they can take the 8th grade test. But you can't have an 8th grade test. If an 8th grade student is taking algebra and you want to give them a higher grade test, there isn't one because it's only 3 through 8. But absolutely give higher grades. So when we looked at the interims, you could see that there was one for grade 3, 4, 5, all the way through 8. On the modulars, there's the same. There are assessments for 3 through 8, but there are choices in those. So you want to click on the plus sign again. Otherwise, you open up everything. Right now, I just want to give the measurement and data B and the measurement and data C. So by putting a check mark in those boxes now, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. There is no more plus sign. So when you get to no more plus sign, then you can put a check in the box. Once you've chosen your assessments, you start the live session. This is something that I haven't found that useful, and as a matter of fact, it's been a little bit of a problem. If all of your 5th grade teachers are going to give the numbers in base 10 assessment, and one says, oh, this is test 1, one says it's interim test opportunity 1, and one says it's a pretest, their scores won't be lumped together. So if all of your teachers are taking, all of your students are in one grade, are taking the same assessment, the teacher should choose the same option here. So what I'm trying to tell people is just choose unassigned. It doesn't really matter. If you gave the test in October, you're going to know it's the fall test. If you've got 3 sets of results out there, you know that the first date is the first one you gave, and the second date is the second one you gave. So there's no reason to keep track this way. I would just choose it unassigned. If somebody finds out that it's really useful to separate it, I would love to know that, but it really isn't yet. And it is, if you use these big long names, we're having some trouble opening up the files. So stay with unassigned. So once you choose that, the session will start. And remember, if you've done this before, you remember that we've got the session ID. Students need to know what the session ID is so they can enter it into their computer when they're logging on. There's also a step in there that I don't have slides for, that you have to approve the students. Once a student gets partially logged on, you have to approve them. And the screen will show you that, and they'll walk you right through that. But if you have questions, you can call me and I can show you. This is a test ticket. Students, in order for the students to take the test, they have to know how to log in. The 2 pieces of information they need are their first name, spelled the way it's spelled in the system. It may be spelled wrong in the system, but then they have to enter it incorrectly if that's the way it's spelled. And they need this SSID. So you can print these tickets and give them to them. Here's the screen. Actually, the screen this year looks a little bit different than this, but it wants the same information. It wants the student's ID number, their name spelled exactly the way it's spelled on the card, and then that session ID that you got when you started the live session. That's how you administer it. Does that make sense? If you've done it before, it probably makes sense. If you haven't, it's a little more difficult, so download this PowerPoint and follow it step by step, and it will make sense. In order to try this, you have to have two computers. If you have two teachers and you want to try it, you've got to have one teacher signing on as a teacher and one teacher or one computer signing on as a student. So now to the results. What do the results look like and how do I get to them? The first thing, again, this is the home page. You go to Test Administration, and then you choose Airways Reporting down here. This is just for the interims, the summatives you get in the ORS, the online reporting system, which is one of the top buttons. This is a sample of what it might look like after kids have taken the test. So here's some teachers, 15 teachers gave 15 students took numbers and operations fractions B, and 11 students also took numbers and operations fractions B, and it's all third grade. One of them chose pretest, one of them chose unassigned. So I can't get that data all together on the system. I have to download it to a spreadsheet. So that was why you really just want to pick the same thing every time. In this sample, I'm going to choose numbers and operation base 10. To go into the data, you just click on it. Here you can see 84 students took the test. The average score for those 84 students was 463. And you have this little diagram of how the above, is it 3? I can't remember now. There's a key to this that I don't have on here, but I think it's how many were, oh yeah, it would be how many were above standard, how many were below, and how many were at standard. And I can't remember without the key which one is which, but which way the colors go, but you will see that. You'll see that on when you log in. So I'm going to click on this, and I come to a screen that looks like this.
And there's a couple of questions.
Yep.
The first question is, so do you see all the results for all the teachers or just your results?
You will only see the results that are in your roster. So if you don't have a roster set up, you won't see them. If you give your class the test, let's say that you have 17 kids in your class, you administer the test the way we just administered, the way you start the session and they take the test. You will not see their results if you don't have a roster. So you have to have a roster set up in order to see your students. You can have a roster set up and see all the students, or you can have a roster set up to see the whole school, or just for your class. That's up to your district how they want to do that. But you won't be able to see any results unless you have a roster. Did that make sense? And I'm going to show you how to set up a roster.
No, that's great. Yeah, there was a question about how you create a roster, so okay. You'll show that in a minute.
Yep, I'll show that.
And then the other question was, you mentioned that a teacher should sign on, one computer as a student, and the question is, how does a teacher sign on as a student?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. You're not supposed to do that, so I probably shouldn't have said it. The way you would sign on as a student, if whoever's asking has given this before, then you would log on one computer, and the students they log on another computer and they open the secure browser. Every school has that secure browser set up differently, so you'd have to talk to someone who's done it before in your school or your IT department where they put that piece of software. So you would on one computer set up the session. On the other computer, you would start the New Hampshire secure browser, it's called. You can download that, I think, you can download that from the home screen to your own computer. Then you just start the session. You double click on the New Hampshire secure browser and that will open it up. And then you have to have the information on the student. You have to have the student's first name and their SSID. If you use a student that's in your school and they're going to take an interim later, however you answer the questions are going to be out there. You can't delete them once you do them. So there you may.
And I think And I think I've heard that some schools might just use they might use a kindergarten student or some student who is clearly not going to be tested right now, just to
Test it.
test it out.
Yeah, I've heard that. You could use a student that you know isn't going to take the test, and use find out what their SSID is, figure out what their first name is, and use them as the test, because that nobody will ever look at that or care if the kid isn't supposed to be taking the test, isn't going to take the test anyway. So definitely some districts are doing it that way. Thank you. Does that make sense? Yes, I hope. That's the hard part. I don't know if people are going, oh yeah, or I have no idea what you're talking about.
That makes sense, Dan, and no one else is asking questions, so I think we're good.
Good, thanks. So when you click, on the last page, I clicked on the report of the assessment I wanted to see, and it opens a page that looks like this. This is pretty much the same information. Here are the 84 students, and it's broken down by teacher, by roster. If there's no rosters, it's not going to be broken down, but this one is broken down by teacher, so you can see that these are different classrooms. Test completion rate, how many kids actually finish the test, average scores, and again, this is the below, standard, at or near, and above. And over here is where you start getting some information. You can click on these two, one or both, and open up and look at the 5 items on which the students performed the best and the 5 items on which the students performed the worst. So for this teacher, I can see that question number, it's for all of them. So it's for all 84, actually. Question 2, 3, 6, 7, and 8 were the ones the students did the best on. And 1, 4, 5, 10, and 12 were the questions the student did the worst on. You can then open up and look at all of the questions. So this has 12 questions. You can look at all of them in order. I can say, okay, question number 1, only 18% of those 84 students got that answer right. On this one, 93% of the students got that right. So they did well on that. If you want to, so I would go in and look at this question and go, yay, we taught that really well, yay. This one too, we taught that really well. And then eventually get down to, only 18%. You got to look at what was the question, how did the students answer it, and then reteach this topic if it's an important one, and then probably retest them. Be careful when the questions are worth 2 points, because it doesn't calculate it correctly. If it's worth 2 points, they don't divide it by 2. Just check the score on the 2 point when you get 2.1s. It doesn't do the calculation right. Now I want to look at by student. Yep.
I'm sorry. And a couple of questions. One is, can you find the question that your class did best on or the worst on, or is it just the whole grade?
You can't. That's a good question. I think I'm not sure, but I think if you go into your roster, if you click on just your roster, it will go in and show you that. Oh, I want to back up. Let me see. Don't have the screen for that. But I bet if you go into just yours, you would be able to see that. I don't know that, though. That's a good question. I can actually find that out. Can you write that down? Because I can look that up.
Sure. And then what about also before you said, maybe would that be a reason to use the fall or the unassigned? Would you only be seeing the ones in the fall?
No, because if you're out there by rosters, you can just look at your roster.
Okay.
And if it's just the fall, I see what you mean. I think it would. I think you can just do it by your roster. Would be my guess, without separating it. But if I look that up, I can send an email about that.
Okay, I'll write the question for you.
Okay,
and then there was also a question about how you find the student's SSID.
I'm going to show you that in a minute when we go into TIDE. So I'll show you that. That's the next. I think that's the next topic. So let's see. So I want to look at, what am I doing here? I want to look at the results by student now. So I'm going to click on that, and here are my students. Here's student 1, or actually this is the whole group, I think. Here's student 1. He got a 441. which was low, and you can see how whether they got the questions right or wrong. All of these were wrong, and these were right, where they got 1 point. Actually, this was, well, no, they only got 0 points, so that doesn't matter. I want to know what this question is. 82% of my students got that right, or 82% of the students, whatever students they are, got this right. What was it? You just click on the number and it brings up the question. And I'm sorry I'm blocking the question again, but when you do it, the question will come up. So you can look at the question, which is really handy. If you want to see how the student actually answered the question, you just click on the question number and the student answer will pop up. I don't think I have a sample of that, but you can try that and you'll see how they answered it. You'll see what numbers they put in, what equation they put in, what words they typed in. So that's very, very useful. And you can sometimes see, 90% of your students put the same wrong answer. So you have to think about what you were, how you taught that topic, because they all picked the same wrong answer. Something's up with that. If you want to download, oh, do you have a question?
Well, somebody's saying they're confused about how to interpret the scores or percentages for 2-point questions.
Oh, all right. The 2-point questions. If everybody got, let's say there were 10 kids in the class and everybody got them right, it'd be 20 points. And well, let's say everybody got 1 point for it. If they all got 1 point, it would be 10 points. And the way the system would calculate it out is, since there were 10 students, 10 points, 100% of them got it right. So it doesn't do that calculation right. So if everybody got it right, there are 200 points, or 200, yeah,
20?
Am I saying that right? And I'm switching that around. Go ahead, you try, Mike.
No, I thought you said there were 10 kids and each one was 2 points, so they 20 points?
It would actually the score would be 200%, but it would still tell you 100%. It's not going to tell you 200%. If everybody gets 2 points, it really should only be 100% of the students got it right. If everybody gets 1 point, 100% of the students got 1 point, but they only got 50% of the points. But it will say 100. Did that make sense?
It makes sense, but it sounds like it's not that helpful there.
No, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's incorrect. So if you have a 2-point question, it's incorrect. So what I usually do is I download the data to a spreadsheet, and then I just recalculate it in the spreadsheet. I just count up the points, divide it by the number of students, and divide it by 2. The system just
somebody's saying that it says they got 2% got it right, not 2.0 for 200%. I'm not sure what
on this one.
Is that the one you're asking about?
Well, this 20%, 20% of them got it right, but it really may only be one person got it right. It depends on, I don't know how many kids there are, but if it's counting the number of points, not the number of total. Like a student should have gotten 2 points really in order to get that right? But if every student gets 1 point and there are 10 students, that's 10 points. And the system says, oh, 10 students, 10 points, 100%.
All right, so it's basically 10 students, 10 points. So it doesn't matter how many points there are, it just requires 1 point per student to be 100%?
Yes, the way it does the calculation. It just takes, so it doesn't do it. It just takes the average, I think, and then if it's over 100, it just ignores it and makes it 100. It doesn't. Okay,
so people understand, it seems like everyone understands it, but now the question is, are they going to fix it?
I don't know. I mean, I have not sent something in this year, but I should send something. You write that down. Can you write that down for me too?
I will write that down.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, it's a problem, but look at the question. This one, I mean, if it says it's the worst, it's probably going to be the worst. If it says it's the best, it might not be. So if one of your 2 points questions end up over here, you should definitely look at it and make sure that your students got 2 points, or check out how many students got 2 points. If I want to print it, if I want to download it, I can click on print, download it to a spreadsheet. You can just print it by just printing it. But when I download it to a spreadsheet, then I can manipulate it however I want. So you click that print, click on summary and item score so you get all the detail, and then save it to a CSV, which will act pretty much like an Excel spreadsheet. You open it with Excel. And then confirm. So I got the little arrows floating there, okay, then confirm it. And that's how you could download the data. Does that make sense? When you look at the student data, I didn't show this part, but when you click on the student answer, the number that's next to the student name under the question number, it will tell you it will give you a rubric on how it was answered. It will tell you the standard that it was covering, which is also very handy to know. Now into the TIDE system, we have like 10 minutes, no? I'll talk even faster. Into the TIDE system, there are things that you have to do in the TIDE system if you're going to give the interim assessments. Just like there are things that somebody has to do with the TIDE system for the summatives. You have to print test tickets. You have to set up any accommodations that you want your students to have. And if you want to give access to other grades, you also have to do that in here. It's not if you give a third grader a test without setting it up, if you give a third grader a fourth grade test without coming into TIDE first and setting that up, they won't be able to access that test. So first, we'll print test tickets. This is the 9-box page. I go into TIDE. This is what it looks like now, and I choose print testing tickets. When that comes up, I can either print from the student list or print from the roster list. In this case, I'm going to show you the student list, but it doesn't really matter. If I want to print the whole roster, I probably would choose roster. If I just want to pick a couple kids, I would choose the student. I'm going to search for 5th grade students. If I happen to know their last name, I can type them in. If I don't, or if I do or don't, doesn't matter. I can just search for all 5th grade students and then view the results. So these are my student names, and their SSID is right here that you can't see, it's covered up. But I want to print a test ticket for this student and this student. So I just put check marks, click the print, and I slide down and click on my selected test tickets. Those are the 2 I want to print, and just click it. What size do I want? You can make the size of the test tickets any of these choices, whichever you want. And then I just print them. They'll look something like this. Here's the first name, and here's the SSID. So if you're going to go in and try it using a student that isn't, you're going to practice it, you as the teacher are going to practice, you need to go in and find out what their SSID is. You don't need to print the test ticket because you can just go into TIDE and look at it right here. But you do need to get the SSID number. So I'm going to go forward, I'm going to print it. This is what they look like. And I pass them out. Oops, I'm going to back up again. So that's test tickets. And if you print them at the beginning of the year, if you're going to start using the interim assessments now, you can print the test tickets and save them for the whole year. If they get all gross and messed up from your kids' dirty hands, then you'll have to print new ones. Or, if they get lost, you have to print new ones. But you can save them as a PDF file and just reprint them. Now, this is how you would change the grade of the test that the student's going to take. You're going to go into the accommodations, designated supports, and universal tools section. Again, the 9-box page. Go into TIDE. This time you're going to choose students. And you can either upload the interim grades. If you go into this upload interim grades, it will show you the layout of a spreadsheet that it needs, and you just put the students' SSIDs in and the grades you want them to have and upload it. If you want to do one, there are 2 students in your class, you want to be able to have them access a different grade, you can just go in by student. So search for the students. Here's a list of students. If I want all of them, I'm going to go through one by one. I can just put a check there, or I could have just checked each, one student, and whichever I want. I think that's what I'm going to do here. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I'm wrong. I said that wrong. Forget that. You have to go in and edit. That screen shouldn't have been there. So I'm going to back up. I search for my students, and I get my list. Here's my list. And I'm going to edit the student's record, the one that I want to give the multiple grade test to. So I'm going to go into the student's page, and this is what the top will look like. Scroll down a little bit, and there's a section that says Interim Eligibility. When I first get in there, this was a 6th grade student. Grade 6 is chosen. I need to just select all. Now this student can take any grade assessment. I could have just chosen 7 or 5, but while I'm in here, I might as well just pick them all. It's not going to hurt anything to have them all in there. It only affects the interims and the modulars. It doesn't affect the summatives. I have.
And there's a question when you before it said upload grades. Can you upload new students, or these students already have to be in-tied through the department's incoming?
The students have to be in there. We don't have any access to putting students in here. The state does that. So if the student has to be in there for them to take the test. And sometimes you will have a student who just came into your class and they won't be able to access this until it goes through the process. And it takes, once they're in the I4C system, I think it takes just one night, right? Mike, do you know?
Yeah, it is. It's an overnight thing. Okay. So they have to upload them in the incoming student roster then in I4C, and then the next day it's in tied, and then you can change the grade.
Yeah. So you might want to, if you have new students, before you give the interim assessment, you might want to check, make sure that they have a record that they are actually in this system. So that's what you have to do for in tied. You have to, or in the whole system, you want to go to the assessment viewing application, look at the assessments, look at the questions. You want to go into tied, set things up. Then you can distribute the test tickets, and then start the live section. And in Airways, you would go and look for the results. And if you download this PowerPoint from the webinar, you'll be able to have this document. And I think that is it. So you go to, it's that website, and that's it. So do we have questions? It's 4:14. I just want everybody to know.
Yep, and thank you, Anne, for going through it. And I know that we ran short of time, so I appreciate you going through it quickly. And hopefully everybody knows that, as Anne mentioned, the PowerPoint's there, so you can certainly take your time looking through it later. And you can also reach out to Anne if you've got questions. Yep. And there is a question that said they don't see, I guess they're taking a look online right now, and they don't see the science tests. Are the science tests already there or coming?
They're on 5, they're in grades 5, 8, and 11.
So they should see them there right now if they look at grade 5 and 11.
Whoever you are, if you could look again and just let me know to make sure they're there, because if they're not, then there is a problem. We'd have to figure that out. I will stay on for a few minutes if people have more questions, and if we can unmute you if you want.
Okay, so somebody's saying the science modulars only have 1 or 2 questions per modular. Will there be more questions coming?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that.
And then I think they're also saying is that the modulars are there now, but they don't see the science interim there now.
There are no, actually the science ones really are interims. I don't know why they're calling them they're going to cover all of the topics, all of the standards within that one topic. So they could have called them modulars or interims. They called them interims. So they're not going to have the other version. But I didn't know that there were only 2 questions. That something else. Can you write that one down too, Mike?
Just whether they got more questions for science.
Yeah, or is that all? Maybe there are only. I mean, if they're really in-depth questions, then maybe there are only 2. I don't know. I don't know the science questions very well.
Okay, I'll write that down, and okay. Anne's going to follow up with everybody. You'll all get an
email for that.
And there's a question of, did you go over how to make a roster?
Oh, I did not, did I? I didn't. Shoot, I thought I did. You know what? I can't. I don't have access to a system that I can show it to you, but I can tell you. If there's another quick question before that, I can answer it, and that whoever it is wants to do the roster, I can just talk to you by yourself. Or if there are a few people, I can just tell you how to do the roster step by step.
No, why don't you go ahead, Ann? I don't think there's any other questions. I know there was the question about the science interim, and again, not being very comprehensive, and Ann will let everyone know what she finds out about the detail for the science.
Yeah, I'll send an email about that. So I'll show you how to do the rosters. I'll get to a point, and I can't show you all the way through, but I can show you some. Let's see. So I'm going to go to the portal. I'm going to click on Tide. And then you don't have to do this, but you will probably just have one school. This is a little scary doing this so fast. I just don't want to get to the point where I'm showing any names here. It's just not working. It's just not working. So I'll just tell you what you do. You're going to go to Tide.
That's okay, Ann.
Okay.
The person who asked to as well said that they could call you.
Oh, yeah. Here, let me go to the end of that screen so you have my phone number.
I'll give it to him as well. I'm sure.
Here are some phone numbers. Yeah, you can call me and I can just walk you through it. And anybody who has questions about that, I can walk you through it. But if you go onto Tide, users, rosters, it'll walk you through it. You got to search for the students. I mean, it'll walk you through it. But definitely call me. Any other questions?
Let's see.
Still a few people on there.
There's two more important questions for you, at least two. Let's see. There's one that says, "Thank you, Ann, and everyone at DS. This was great." There's another one that says, "You guys are great. Thanks again." Okay. And I have to clarify, it's not multiple people. This is Ann. Ann is great.
It's wonderful.
So thank you, Ann, so much. You worked so hard on this, and Ann knows this stuff really well. And she knows this stuff really well because she really believes it's so valuable.
Anybody who uses these, any of the teachers that I know who have used these, love them. So really, you should definitely try and figure out a way to get them into your lessons, into your day. So yes, David, you can call me. I see that that's you. Call. Okay. Anyone else? People are still on, so I'm wondering if you guys still have questions, because it is past 4:15. So ask away.
And if not, everybody should have a good rest of Monday, and everybody should vote tomorrow. You should vote yourself at least, and you should also make sure you bring someone else you call somebody else and make sure somebody else votes tomorrow as well.
Thank you for listening, and definitely call or write if you have questions. Bye.